Okay, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to this afternoon's plenary session. I'm standing in, as you can tell, I am not Antonio Villaraigosa, and I certainly am not Michael Nutter. But as part of the Neapolitan presidency, I am Mayor Scott Smith, and would like to welcome you all. Late last year, we announced a new USCM multi-year partnership with one of the great names in corporate America, Scott's Miracle-Gro. We like that. To beautify our nation's cities through gardens and green space development. We know, and this is a script for Mayor Villaraigosa, so I'm going to skip this part about Los Angeles, but I can assure you, and Mayor Villaraigosa would assure you also, that Scott's is a great resource for mayors who are looking to enhance municipal gardens and greenscapes. Over the past several years, Los Angeles' Arts and Parks Committee, how'd you like that transition there, has adopted a number of resolutions calling for cities to develop municipal community gardens. Oh, I guess that's the USCM arts thing. And also grow and maintain edible gardens in city parks. The GRO 1000 Gardens and Green Spaces Grants Awards program was created to promote and recognize mayoral leadership in this area. Let me now call on Rick Shank, Chief Environmental Officer with Scott's Miracle-Gro, to announce the award recipients. Rick?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry that Mayor Villaraigosa couldn't be here, but excellent stand-in.
Thank you.
You got to put in some stuff for your city that way.
We'll do that.
That's great. I'd like to thank everyone here, the entire conference of the mayor's members, for having us here this week in D.C. On behalf of my colleagues from Scott's Miracle-Gro, it's an honor to be part of this meeting of our nation's mayors. I would also like to thank Tom Cochran and his team for their tremendous support these past few months as we embarked on creating our partnership. For those of you not familiar with Scott's Miracle-Gro, we have been in the garden and green space business for 144 years. We were founded in 1868 as a family-owned grass seed business in Marysville, Ohio, and that's still where our headquarters are at. And while we have grown our business and are a leader in providing lawn and garden and outdoor living products and services, our roots remain firmly grounded in the cities where we operate and the communities we call home. As an organization, we believe it's important to help nurture and give back to our cities and neighborhoods and the people in those communities. We also firmly believe in the benefits that gardens and green spaces uniquely bring to our cities, its residents, and the environment. As mayors of our urban centers, you know what gardens and green spaces can do, from jump-starting economic development and urban revitalization to providing a place for children to play. Gardens and green spaces have the power to transform communities. Scott's has already had the pleasure of working with many of the mayors here today on a variety of transformative green space initiatives. Working with Mayor Villaraigosa, we've seen just how a teaching garden in Los Angeles can help children with autism to learn, grow, and explore. In the city of Houston, we saw firsthand how a community comes together in support of the edible garden movement, all in partnership with Mayor Anise Parker. So to help more communities experience the tangible benefits of gardens, we launched Grow 1000, a national outreach initiative to create 1,000 gardens and green spaces in the U.S., Canada, and Europe by 2018. After learning about the USCM's commitment and strategic focus on expanding our nation's green spaces, it was clear that our organizations needed to come together. This partnership was a natural fit. This truly dynamic partnership that will recognize mayoral leadership and stewardship in green space development in our cities and municipalities. And while today's focus is on Grow 1000 and our community garden initiative, we are also excited to explore ways Scott's and the conference will work together in the future to address water quality and conservation issues facing our cities. And now on to the grants. There was an incredible response to the call for grant submissions. We want to thank all of the mayors that applied. The projects demonstrate just how gardens and green spaces are being leveraged for the future of our cities. And now the 2012 Grow 1000 Garden and Green Space Grant recipient cities for the year are Baltimore, Maryland, and the Upton Edible Garden. Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake. So I guess if you'll please step up. Cleveland, Ohio, and the Urban Agricultural Innovation Zone, Mayor Frank Jackson. Columbia, South Carolina, and the I-126 Greystone Boulevard Interchange Green Space, Mayor Steve Benjamin. Corpus Christi, Texas, and the Lindale Park Community Garden, Mayor Joe Adami. And San Francisco, California, and the Casada Gardens and Green Spaces Initiative, Mayor Edwin Lee.
And congratulations to all our award winners. And there was one part of the rules that maybe we should have been more clear on, that is you must be present to win. There is another part of the rule that is left to the chair's discretion, and that is those who are not present, the money will roll over to the chair's hometown. So on behalf of Mesa, Arizona, I would like to thank... Oh, she ruins it. Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake for showing up just in time to save our fine community from receiving the award it justly deserved. Congratulations, Mayor. And thank you, Rick, and thank you to Scott's Miracle Grow. I can't quit saying that name. That's a great name. I'd like to now call on San Francisco Mayor Edward Lee to discuss a new technology and innovation task force that he'll be chairing. I'd like to congratulate Mayor Lee, he's still over there, on his recent election. Congratulations, Mayor Lee, where he is now serving a full term now as Mayor of San Francisco. Mayor Lee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Last year I was interim mayor, and I got a chance to join all of you and made a presentation on a technology solution that we thought would help us with our vehicle congestion called SF Park. And immediately I got quite a few of you to tap in and say, hey, I want to take a look at that technology. Well, for the last year, in addition to running for mayor and being lucky to be successful for a full term, I was able to create a very exciting relationship with our technology companies. If you don't know this, we're home to Twitter, Zynga, Salesforce, and then a few doors away, it's Google and it's Apple and some of the largest technology companies in the world located right around and in San Francisco. So we forged a partnership and created technology to help me as the mayor of one of our great cities in the country to solve some of our solutions, because we're not going to be dependent upon just federal and state monies. We have to actually solve some problems, and we can use technology to do that. So as your rookie mayor, to join you, what I wanted to do was contribute what I can using some of the strengths. And by the way, our unemployment rate in January of last year was 9.5%. By December, 7.8% unemployment rate. Most of that was due to the growth of technology companies in our area. So you can see there's a huge, serious economic drive to this relationship with technology companies. And so in my effort to make my initial year a contributing year to the Conference of Mayors, I wanted to introduce this idea of creating a task force for technology innovation. and work with those of you. And I already got a shout out from the mayor of Gainesville, Florida, to join me on this task force and open it up to anyone else. I think I got a shout out for Austin as well that wants to immediately join and see what kinds of technology can help us solve some of our urban problems, increase and maybe improve service delivery for our residents and our constituents. And I'll begin with ESSA Park, but there are many, many other areas where technology is going to help us, and we're using the innovation of their firms and the innovative minds to help us come out with some solutions. So we'd like to start this, and we think we have a good idea, and I'd invite all of you to join this task force on technology and innovation, newest task force for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Lee. And once again, to reiterate, Mayor Lee is the chair of the task force that Mayor Villaraigosa, our president, has established. Before we introduce this, I know Mayor Villaraigosa is literally just pulling up, and we wanted to make sure, since this is his initiative, that he had the opportunity to appropriately introduce this panel. So, here he comes. And now, entering to the stage, let's give a hand up for the one, the only, Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa.
Thank you, Mayor Smith. Trying to be in 3 places at the same time. Just got back from the White House. You know, as president of the Conference of Mayors, I've made promoting a vigorous metropolitan export policy a top priority. And as you know, so has this conference. This plenary panel on exports and ports is really a call to action to all of us to join in the U.S. Conference of Mayors Export Ready Metro Challenge. Now, as shown in our Metro Economies report yesterday, increasing exports is critical to job creation in our cities. And that's not just true for a city like mine. It's not just true for, you know, the Houstons, the Miamis, the Jacksonvilles. It's true for cities large and small, from LA to Burlington. And metro regions are where the business supports and financing and ports and goods movement infrastructure all come together to make that possible. Now, many of our cities and our ports, our Chamber of Commerce, our universities, the states and federal agencies are doing great work to help businesses export. But generally, our export systems are fragmented and unfocused. They're not integrated to get the greatest return on the investment. Our Export Ready Challenge calls on mayors to commit to the development of comprehensive metropolitan export plans for their regions, bringing together the diverse stakeholders working on exports, and then to be executing those plans in 2013 or sooner. Now, these plans will help us focus on efforts to address industry clusters with the greatest return, to fill gaps, eliminate redundancies among export service providers, to use our existing resources better. Now, the inspiration for this is, frankly, a lot of people, but one of them is Mayor Adams in Portland, Mayors Ryback and Coleman in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and Mayor Minor in Syracuse. They and I all are finalizing metropolitan export plans, partnering in a pilot project with the Brookings Institution and the Rockefeller Foundation. Now, Brookings has agreed to provide a very detailed how-to guide for creating an export plan, and is also planning to make available some group training sessions. We'll have federal support. Last summer, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, as you know, adopted a policy resolution calling on federal agencies to assist in implementing customized metropolitan export plans. Now, the federal government responded, and the National Export Strategy explicitly includes a commitment to help. And I urge you all to join in this challenge. And now I'm very pleased to introduce the moderator for our panel on this issue, Mary Jordan is the editor of the Washington Post Live. She's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who's covered, boy, we've had a couple of them today, who has covered stories ranging from the White House to British politics to religious extremism in Pakistan. In 14 years abroad as the Post co-bureau chief in Tokyo, Mexico City, and London, she's written from over 40 countries on a wide variety of topics, including award-winning coverage of the Asian financial crisis. She and her husband and colleague, Kevin Sullivan, won the 2003 Pulitzer Prize for International Reporting for their series on the Mexican justice system. Ms. Jordan's international experience and work make her particularly qualified to help lead our discussion. Let me also briefly introduce our other panelists. First, we're joined by Francisco Sanchez, Undersecretary for the International Trade at the U.S. Department of Commerce. Undersecretary Sanchez leads the International Trade Administration, which assists in the development of U.S. trade policy and helps create jobs and economic growth by promoting U.S. companies. Undersecretary Sanchez is widely recognized as an international expert on trade issues, and we're very fortunate to have him with us today. Our next panelist is a breath of fresh air, Jacksonville Mayor Alvin Brown, the chair of our new Metro Exports and Ports Task Force, and a strong voice on the need for port investment and export promotion. Along with Mayor Brown, we're joined by Minneapolis Mayor R.T. Ryback, and you are here. He was with me a few minutes ago at the White House and got back quickly. He's been working closely with Brookings on a Metro export agenda. And speaking of Brookings, we're joined by my friend, Bruce Katz. He served as Chief of Staff in the Department of Housing and Urban Development during the Clinton administration. He's currently Vice President of the Brookings Institution and Founding Director of the Brookings Metropolitan Policy Program. And we've worked with him on a number of issues over the 6 years I've been a part of this organization, and he's been a great assistant. So let me turn over the discussion now to our moderator.
Thank you.
Jordan.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Washington Post Live is the division of the Washington Post that organizes presidential debates and forums. And so after 25 years of writing, 14 of them around the world, posted in Tokyo, Mexico, and London, I've come back to Washington and now run forums. This year, export has been a really hot topic. And in fact, in Chicago, LA, and in Washington, just in the last about 6 months, we've organized conferences on exports. So I'm delighted and thank you for inviting me today. President Obama, as everybody here knows, has a national goal to double exports in 5 years. If more businesses sell more, including abroad, they have more money. And they have not only the money, but the need to hire more people. So basically what we're going to talk about for the next 50 minutes is jobs. This is all about a strategy to create more jobs in America. For a long time, it was enough for American companies to sell to American consumers. American consumers, after all, really bought a lot of things. But it no longer makes sense when billions of buyers live outside our borders. The growing middle class around the world wants American products. And so we're going to speak here first. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to kick it off by saying something for a couple minutes. Then we're going to go into some questioning amongst ourselves. And please, we're going to go to the audience for your questions because this is a really important topic. You heard that I worked in 40 countries, from Indonesia to Australia to Cambodia. And so many times I would see trade delegations go over there kind of tepidly because it is shocking that only 1% of American businesses export. 1%. So talk about room to grow. But when they did go, even recently, I only returned from London 2 years ago, and Virginia wine companies kind of tepidly went over to London to show their wine. Now, this is a kind of a tough sell on a continent known for fine wines, they thought, but they were kind of doing this push. The governor was pushing, saying, there's a lot of drinkers abroad, and they want to test Virginia wine. Well, what's really interesting is it's actually taken off in England. And I don't know if that's because the Brits would rather buy wine from the former colonists as opposed to the French that they're often fighting with. But for whatever reason, Virginia wine is now selling in Europe and even in British pubs. So, and with that, I want to turn it over to Secretary Sanchez for some comments, and then we'll go down the line for a kickoff and begin the session that's, in the end, all about jobs.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Thank you for agreeing to host what I think is a very important discussion here for everyone in this audience. I also want to thank Mayor Villaraigosa for his kind introduction, and more importantly, for having the vision and the leadership to make this an issue on the mayor's agenda. I have to say I'm a self-proclaimed trade evangelist. And prior to sitting down at this panel, I found that I'm in good company because I'm sitting with at least 3 other trade evangelists as well. Mayor Brown, who I'm very proud of, a 12-year friend from my home state of Florida. Mayor Ryback, who I've had the opportunity to work with on this Brookings initiative, and Bruce Katz, who the Department of Commerce very proudly partners with on this initiative to localize what Mary referred to, the National Export Initiative, to localize that into municipal export initiatives. So why does this topic matter to you? Well, very simply, exports boost our economy, they create opportunities for business, and they support jobs. Now, if that isn't specific enough for you, let me give you a few statistics that I know that Mayor Villaraigosa understands, and Mayor Brown and Mayor Rybach certainly understand. 95% of the world's consumers live outside the United States. 95%. And according to the IMF, 85% of the projected world economic growth in the next 5 years will happen outside our borders. Mary made reference to billions of consumers. These billions of consumers live in countries that now have an economic growth rate. China growing now at about 9%. It took a little dip, but 9% still pretty good, I'd say. Brazil has a strong growth rate. India, Peru, Turkey, I could go country after country. But all of these countries have opportunities that we can't ignore. We can't just look across the street, across the state, or across the nation. We really do have to think of our market as a global marketplace. Now, U.S. seaports, ports play a very critical role in this. Seaports handle 78% of U.S. exports by tonnage and 36% of U.S. exports by value. U.S. shippers report that infrastructure and policy impediments at ports and in road and rail connections dramatically slow U.S. good movements, resulting in lost sales and opportunities. So this is clearly something that we have to focus on. I'm very happy to report to you that the International Trade Administration, which I have the privilege of overseeing, last year entered into a partnership with the America's Seaport Association. And the idea behind this is to work with our seaports to make sure that we're offering opportunities, particularly to small and medium-sized companies, so they understand what's available, whether it's from federal resources, whether it's from the local community, what's available to help them access these markets. And I'm especially proud of the partnership that we have with Brookings, because the federal government, as committed as we are, as the president, as committed as the president is, we cannot reach his goal of doubling exports alone. We have got to do this in partnerships with cities around the country. So I look forward to a robust discussion here and to take your questions on how the U.S. Department of Commerce and our sister agencies throughout the government can help you put together a robust export promotion program and make that number that Mary made reference to, only 1% of American businesses exporting. increase that number. And by the way, Mary, there's another statistic that's also a little troubling. Of that 1%, 58% of those only export to one market. So if we can get the companies that are already exporting to one market to go to a second or third, can you imagine the jobs you can create in your community? So I thank you for letting me be a part of this and look forward to our discussion.
Perfect. Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Mary. I want to also thank our president, Mayor Villaraigosa, for his commitment and conviction on really forming this, the mayor's Metro Export Port Task Force. Thank him for his leadership on that. It's so important, as Secretary Sanchez talked about, the value in port and export. Two, I want to commend my colleague, Ryback, who's here, who's going to speak to exports, but look forward to working with him and also Bruce and others. I believe that port and export is vital for economic growth and development in our cities. I think it will help small business, which is the backbone of our economy. And I think we have to position cities for the 21st century in the global economy, really positioning ourselves in a marketplace to compete, as the Secretary talked about. And this is just the first, Mary, of many conversations on this issue. We're going to have a national meeting in Jacksonville, Florida, on February the 23rd to the 25th. So I look forward to seeing all of our colleagues coming to Jacksonville for the national meeting, which I think is important. I also look forward to really accelerating and partnering with the Brookings and others to really drill down on what's the relevant and value added for cities and mayors to take the lead on working with the private sector, which is the key, which is the engine of any of our communities, to really foster that economic growth and development. I think when we do that, cities win.
Fabulous. Thank you. Mayor Ryback.
Great. Well, I want to first thank Mayor Villaraigosa for bringing this to us, because this is a new but I think really dynamic area for us to be in. And with the U.S. conference is in a real sweet spot here between having a person leading it in Mayor Villaraigosa who wants to do this, having Brookings leading this table, and they've got Rockefeller Foundation and J.P. Morgan Chase. We've got a really good coalition here. I think, one of the things, if I was sitting out in the audience, I would be thinking a little bit about, well, exports are great, but I've got to go home, I've got to work on potholes, I've got to fix this budget where I've got no money, I've got to do all these other things. So really, where does this fit on our agenda? Well, if you really stop and look at this issue, as much as it seems like a second or a third level issue for a mayor, it's also pretty much close to the number one thing we can do to grow jobs in our community, because the numbers are so great. 95% of the consumers, as you heard, are from outside this country. Only 1% of our economy comes from exports. But how do we really move the dial? Well, one of the things I'd like us over these next few months to look at is to really lay out a couple key things that I believe that mayors can be doing. And I think there are three big things at the U.S. conference that we can do. And under Mayor Brown's leadership on the subcommittee, I want to really push these issues. The first is to get some real data out there and to really be a baseline for export data and then move it forward. If, as the President has asked, we move from 1% of our business being exports to 2%, let's measure that. There's a lot of data out there. I'd like the U.S. conference to be able to brand that release of the data every year, do it perhaps in partnership with Brookings, so everybody's looking to the U.S. conference for that issue. The second point that I'd really like us to do is to really look at this idea of how do we create a template at the local level, and how do we create something that a new mayor who's got all sorts of other things on their plate need to do. And so I think one of the things we want to look at, and I'll get to this in just a brief second, is I think there's some models that are emerging from this work at Brookings. The third is to bring a mayor's perspective to all of this, and it should be the value add. So often, India and China are educating so many more engineers. How many times do we talk about our communities globally from a deficit standpoint? Let's turn that around. Cities, more than any other part of America, are global hothouses. In Minneapolis, we speak 100 languages. We come from all over the world. Minneapolis and St. Paul and our city of Rochester, just an hour and a half away, Mayor Breedy is mayor of, really create the best opportunity for our state, sitting in the middle of the country, to rapidly globalize our workforce. And that's a mayor's perspective on all of this.
So when you look at the way we're trying to do that in Minneapolis, we're doing a summer job strategy that gets Somali kids into a business, they speak 7 languages, and they move forward. We're creating a global workforce, and that's, I think, really at the core of what we do. Stop and dissect the history of any of your cities, and you will recognize that exports have already played a huge role. Minneapolis in the middle of the city, Minneapolis, St. Paul in the middle of the country, only natural waterfall in the Mississippi, helps it turn into the milling capital of the world. That gives rise to General Mills and Pillsbury and Cargill and other food giants. That helped investment in retail companies like Best Buy and Target. That's how innovation happened with 3M. Medtronic came out of the university, which got invested in by all those companies. Every one of our communities has that. And if you want to understand the final point that I want to make, I believe export strategies are different in each of our cities. And what we need to do is take our local assets and identify where's our Silk Road. What is the place that's most logical based on our population, based on where our companies export, based on where we have flights that are coming? The Silk Road really connected East and West. And what is America's Silk Road that goes through cities? I was in Xi'an, China, which was the end or the beginning of the Silk Road, no matter how you look at it. And when you walk through the streets, right at the end of the Silk Road, it feels very different than the rest of China. Global trade influenced Xi'an. Global trade is influencing us, and I believe as mayors we should move that up to a higher point in our agenda, and I look forward to working with you on it.
Thank you very much. Bruce.
I just want to build on some of these comments because I think there are 3 questions here. Why cities, why mayors, and what to do. And, if you think about trade, investment, exports, frankly, even manufacturing, a lot of the conversation in the United States happens at the national scale or perhaps at the state scale. It's almost like we've delegated or relegated these critical issues only to the higher tier of our federal republic. The fact is the national economy is a network of city and metro economies, and the United States is the quintessential urban and metro nation. 84% of our population lives in cities and metros, 91% of our GDP, and the top 100 metros are 2/3 of the population and 3/4 of the GDP. The reason why we're talking about China and India and Brazil is because they're urbanizing. That's why they're growing. They're becoming more like us. And that opens enormous markets, like Mary said and the Undersecretary said, for American products, both goods and services. Why mayors? Exports cut across many different dimensions, and they cut across many different jurisdictions. If you're going to export well, you need to connect the dots between advanced manufacturing and advanced services, skills training, infrastructure, particularly in the ports. Mayors are really at the center. They're the hub of many of these disparate sectors and clusters and disparate constituencies. And as the federal government, with many different programs and policies and tools, tries to connect either to companies or to place, in many ways, mayors are the conduit. You're the place that can, or you're the person and the institution that can pull all this together. The coordinating role, very hard to do, particularly in a federal republic from the top down. Last piece, what to do. And I just want to build from these comments. I think mayors have to do several things, and this is just building from what we've been working on with LA and Portland and Syracuse and Minneapolis, St. Paul. First, make the case about exports and, frankly, trade and investment. Because for a long time, the U.S. has been very inward focused. We're a very large market, 310 million people. We haven't had to look out. Because domestic demand is crippled after this recession and global demand is rising, particularly in the rising cities, we've got to make the case to look outside our borders. Second, as Mayor Ryback has said, bring it down to your place. Because what Denver exports is different from Detroit. What Minneapolis excels at is different from Miami. In the prior economy, frankly, we lost that sense of difference. A Walmart is a Walmart is a Walmart, irrespective of where it is. Same footprint, same goods, same products. That's why they're successful. When you talk about exports, you've got to talk about the distinctive assets, the special assets and advantages of different places. And last piece, once you've made the case and basically with Brookings and the U.S. Conference and others understood your starting point, then pull together that disparate group of university and business and union and other institutions so that you can devise that special and tailored export strategy that works for you, building with these incredible resources from the federal government, the states, and ultimately the private sector. I'll just end with one anecdote. I had a session with the CEO of a major financial institution not headquartered in the United States. And they had seen our work at Brookings on exports. And his initial comment to me is, welcome to the club. The United States, from our perspective, is an emerging market on exports because you've been so intensely focused within your own borders. We think you're a good bet, you're in a good investment for a growth trajectory over time. It took a while for me to respond, to react to or recover from the emerging market comment. But it just shows you in the private sector, they see this as an upward trajectory. Cities can catch that wave. They can channel that wave. This is the way to grow more jobs and better jobs. Thank you.
I just want to follow on what Bruce said about, so what did the mayors do? What should you do? A couple thoughts I had is that, again, when I was abroad, I would see, especially in Asia this was true, that when mayors and senators and governors lead trade delegations, it really does matter, especially in hierarchical societies. The businessmen were really aided by an elected official going abroad to China or Korea or some other countries because it gave them credence. And one of the things that we're going to get into when we get into the nitty-gritty is kind of how do you identify what to sell abroad? And then how do you get a reliable partner abroad? I know the Commerce Department has 100 offices around the world. There's people to go to. So one of the things a mayor can do, along with leading delegations, is kind of being the conduit, as you said, linking him to resources at the federal government. And as we kick off this part, just kind of getting into, okay, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and my brother is in economic development there, and obviously he wants companies in Cleveland to sell more goods. So when someone comes to him and says, well, I want to sell this not just to Canada and Mexico, but to Korea, where we now have a new free trade agreement with Korea, Colombia, and Panama, making it cheaper and easier to sell abroad. What do you do? I think that one thought on what you sell abroad is everyone knows that American beef and cars and medical devices are popular abroad. What I think has been interesting is, as I've gone around the country, is the wild variety of made-in-America items that are popular abroad. For instance, there's a woman in L.A. who has made a huge business selling her lipstick. Now, she said to me, I thought that in China they could make it cheaper, or in France it would be more, kind of luxurious. But it's been a huge, huge moneymaker for her. There's a woman in Chicago who inadvertently, she was trying to sell something else, and she said something about Christmas wrapping paper that had Merry Christmas spelled wrong on it, and how she could sell massive quantities of this kind of irregular paper. She's now making millions of dollars selling this to India, like, anything that says happy birthday or anything misspelled. There's almost, you can't imagine. You should really think broad about what people want out there. And with that, I think would open it up to talking about what sells abroad and how do you go about it? Do you have to, if you're the mayor, someone comes to you, do you say, okay, get a website up, which is one of the things a lot of people talk about? Okay, let's begin.
So a couple of things that sell. You mentioned a few of them. Aviation. You might think, well, that's all well and good, but we can't have a Boeing plant in every city in America. The truth is our aviation sector is not just airplanes, so that's a very important part. Aviation parts, component parts to an airplane. Embraer is a Brazilian company that makes regional jets and executive jets. And they're made in Brazil by and large, although they now have a Florida plant, and I understand they're bringing in parts through the port of Jacksonville, Embraer is. But I love Embraer, even the part that's manufactured in Brazil. And the reason I love Embraer is because 60 to 70% of each of their airplanes are U.S. content. And everything from seats to avionics, you name it, it's coming from the United States. Medical devices, Mayor, you mentioned Medtronics. We have a very robust medical devices plant. But as Mary pointed out, it doesn't have to be highly sophisticated equipment. I toured a plant in Montana, about 45 minutes from Big Sky, Montana. If you've ever been to Big Sky, Montana, it's not a big population. And there's a company there called Westpaw, and they make environmentally sustainable pet products. And they're exporting to 25 countries. And that little company employs about 150 people. And they're good-paying jobs. So you have everything from aviation to environmentally sustainable pet products that are making their way into the global marketplace. A couple of things very quickly. The United States government has a number of services. Mary mentioned that we have offices all over the world, and we do, and they can provide market information for your companies. We have tailored programs for a very low fee to do customized work for a particular company. Our sister agency, the XM Bank, and our sister agency, SBA, the Small Business Administration, both have export loan guarantee programs to help facilitate sales. My colleague Fred Hochberg says he's in the sleep business. The first time I heard him say that, I didn't quite know what he was talking about, but it made sense to me. Through his guarantee loan programs, he makes sure that small and medium-sized companies can sleep at night when they've made a sale overseas, knowing they're going to get paid. But these are all programs that are offered by the federal government, and working with you and with a program that Brookings has put together, we would welcome the opportunity to put a comprehensive export promotion program together that takes advantage of these federal programs.
And I'd like to talk to the two mayors about one very important piece of this is infrastructure. That to be competitive with Germany, that is an export giant, you have to be quick about and efficient in exporting. And so this other piece of the work for mayors is to try to build up your infrastructure so that it's quick to market. And I'd like to talk about that, either or both of you.
Sure. I think for me, making the case and making it plain for your citizens, because it's not an issue that they tend to think about when they elect a mayor or someone's running for mayor. So I made the economic case. And let's take ports. My port is a $19 billion economic engine. It has already created 65,000 jobs. And the average salary is $44,000 a year. It is a huge economic impact in my city. And so my port needs to be dredged to expand and receive large ships. The Panama Canal 2014 is going to be open, and we need to expand. But we have some challenges infrastructure-wise. And my CEO, Paul Anderson, who I think is one of the best CEOs in the country, we got together and said, we need more funding to fix a couple of challenges at our port. So one of the opportunities was a TAGR grant. I think every mayor in here know about TAGR grants. Well, for the last 2 years, we've applied and failed. So this year, we did the public-private partnership, which I'm big on, working with the private sector, and in this case, CSX, with the state, with the port, and the city to put together an application to make the case about why we need those funds for Jack's Port, to build the infrastructure, to fix, to intermodal, to upgrade the port, to do more business, to export. And, and at the end of the day, we won. We got $10 million. But we were able to get another $20 million from the state, and then the city kicks in. But making the economic case, making the value added that these are jobs, sustainable jobs, have direct impact on the city. It helps your tax base. It just makes good business sense. The other example is working together to be competitive in the marketplace. I work with the Jacksonville Chamber of Commerce, the business community, who's trying to do business and expand their base in the marketplace and compete. So Ambrier, as the Secretary mentioned, is very important to Florida. Brazil is the #1 trading partner. And we're competing for a contract to build those planes for the Air Force. So I went to Brazil, delegation with the governor and all the business leaders, made the case with the chairman and CEO, came back, met with the Secretary of the Air Force to make the case for Jacksonville. Anyway, long story short, we got that contract, $355 million between two locations to build those planes in Jacksonville. Why? Because it's a strong military town, 250,000 personnel, huge economic impact, $14 billion economic impact in my city. So I think the key is making the case, making sure that we have the infrastructure to expand and do the business of the port. Right now, I think that in order to be competitive in the marketplace, exports and ports are it for our cities. The same way we view things in the domestic market about untapped markets, unserved markets in the inner city, it's the same thing abroad. Great opportunity, great markets. We need the tools and resources to compete, to do it. But my message is we got to work with the private sector. We got to work with the business community because they're the engine. We can create that environment and catalyst to grow jobs and economic development, but it's all driven by the private sector.
And what is going through your port and where is it heading?
Well, right now, we're second when it comes to cars, automobiles, fruits, vegetables, you name it, poetry.
Poetry?
Yes. Going through the ports, yes.
What do you mean?
Literally getting, beef.
Oh, poultry. I thought poetry. I was like, wow, that's cool. Because services are, important too,
Wow.
Creativity. I thought that was why that you were created to lead this task force.
I know the Jordan River, but not, come on.
Can I pick up on the other part of this infrastructure issue? Because Mayor Brown did a great job of talking about the physical infrastructure, and that's a key piece of it. There is a second part that I think for mayors we need to work on immediately, and that's the human infrastructure that is critical to making all of this work. The good news for mayors is none of us is starting from zero. We have a lot of people out there who are involved in trade, and the reality is the value add for a mayor is primarily going to be with mid and small-sized business. But in our community, we have all these global companies doing all this work all around the globe. So one of the things that we're working on is what we're calling an export bridge, where we're taking people from, say, 3M or Cargill or the Mayo Clinic, who has great expertise in, say, going to some specific part of India, and then mentoring small emerging businesses. And that's a really important part of it. A second thing we're doing is to really look at what we're calling the International Alumni Association. And what we mean by that is any of our communities have a lot of people around the globe who used to live in our community. In Minneapolis, we have 2 stories of the Target headquarters filled with programmers from India who come for 2 years and go back. They go back to India, and now they're part of our sales force. More students from more Chinese students have gone to the University of Minnesota than any other university in the country. And you dissect each of your communities, and you'll find there are a lot of people around the globe who are really assets. So getting that in place. The final point is to make sure that we don't trip all over each other. Just like your port needs to be dredged so the water easily flows in and out, we've got to realign all these resources we have. So one of the key roles a mayor can play is to pull all these federal groups together. And one of the key things the U.S. conference should do, and I think this is urgent and critical, is to support the president on this strategy of merging these different entities together. That's exactly what the undersecretary needs, so that when export opportunities come into your community, a small business doesn't say, gee, I've got all this federal help, but who the hell do I start with? So that's a really important thing that I think we should be focused on this month.
And Bruce, follow that with, if you're a mayor and your city has not done much in the export world, how do you begin? What's the first things to do?
I think the first thing is to understand that we're not just talking about manufacturing. We're also talking about advanced services. When you look at the total picture of exports from the United States, about 2/3 are goods, 1/3 are services. Let's go back to Cleveland for a second. What is Cleveland exporting? Well, actually, exports includes all the people coming to the Cleveland Clinic for advanced health care. It includes all the foreign students, as you mentioned, coming to Case Western or Cleveland State for higher ed. It includes architecture and real estate, business and professional services. So you need a full scope, a full inventory, your starting point on what you're trading with the world. Now, I think the way to start, frankly, it'll differ from different places, but we found this particularly working with Los Angeles and some of the other cities, is your universities. If you're lucky enough to have a Federal Reserve Bank or some affiliate of the Federal Reserve Bank, they can provide you, in addition to Brookings and the U.S. Conference, with that data platform. So you understand in general what exports and trade look like, but you understand with specificity and precision what you're good at. Because at the end of the day, what this is about is strengthening your strengths. It's not just copycatting everyone else, it's understanding you have a position in the global economy that you can build from, and you have a set of trading relationships with particular countries, yes, but also particular cities that are rising around the world. Last point, it gets to making the case. About 20 years ago, we began to talk about global cities. And I think the conversation at that point was we must be talking about New York, Tokyo, London, Frankfurt, right? The financial hubs, almost the command and control center of international finance. I would say every city and every metro in this room is a globalizing city and metro. You already export goods and services. You already have very distinctive trading partners, which means that you have a base to work from. Once you get your data, once you begin to work out your distinctive strategy, and once you convene these disparate players in your city and metro who probably are working on this already, but are not really coordinated or integrated or connecting the dots, so to speak, between goods and services and skills and infrastructure and exports, you have a fundamental role in this system because you're generalists. You're not specialists, and you can connect the dots between these disparate elements.
There's a small businessman in Baltimore who's made millions of dollars by selling wires, wire baskets, kind of wires to fit. And he was saying that, he just puts it up on the internet, and people in whatever country, right? The internet is global, comes to him, and he started selling it abroad, and then it got bigger, and then he started actually kind of marketing it, and now he's making a lot of money selling abroad and selling more electric wire baskets overseas than here. He was also talking about how mayors are increasingly putting on their websites for people in their town, like if you want information about exporting, go to the Commerce Department. I mean, there's just very simple things that you can do to lead people to the growing resources when this is a national priority. Go ahead.
Free association here, hearing Bruce talk about services, I think that's a very good starting place, is to take inventory of what you do have, because there may be sectors in your communities that you just don't think of as an export. Tourism being a very good example. It's a little counterintuitive because people are coming here instead of a product or a service growing abroad, yet tourism is our number one services export in the world. And why do we care about that so much? Today, President Obama was in Orlando announcing a new initiative to develop a more cohesive and effective federal strategy to increase travel and tourism. Well, a couple of reasons why we should care about that. International travelers, on average, spend about $5,000 to $6,000 per visit, which is substantially more than domestic travelers. We're a major destination for people all over the world, and as countries like China and Brazil grow their middle class, they want to come here, and they want to drop that $5,000 and $6,000 here. So I think taking inventory of things like tourism that you may not immediately think of is an export is important. And a second thing that I want to point out that also may not be readily apparent, and this is another initiative that President Obama put forward last week, which was the idea of insourcing and attracting foreign direct investment. Now, foreign direct investment in and of itself creates jobs. Companies come and set up shops, but they also increase exports. Toyota now has operations, I think, in at least 3 cities, and this year they will export from here 100,000 units. Those 100,000 units made in the USA, sold abroad. And the one I like best, the example I like best of Toyota is that a bunch of those are going to Korea. A Japanese company making their automobiles here. I think it's actually a minivan in this case, and selling it to Korea. That's as a result of the Korea Free Trade Agreement. But I think taking inventory of all the things you have to offer and including in your mix attracting foreign direct investment, which might also be part of your export strategy.
Let's take your questions now. We have a floating mic, I think, around the room, and you can direct it to, tell me who you are, please, first, and then direct your question. I see somebody over here.
Good afternoon. My name is Donna Owens. I'm the city administrator for Niagara Falls, New York. And I'm very excited about hearing about the municipal export plan, and would like our city, on behalf of the mayor, to be a part of it. Because when you said tourism, we receive over 8 million tourists a year. And we're a small city with 51,000 people. However, we're an international border city, and we understand exactly what you're talking about and would like to participate.
Could I say one thing about that I think is interesting is tourism in and of itself is critically important. There will be more people in the Chinese middle class than all of the United States in a few years, and that's really big. And by the way, the thing the president is doing today on visa reform was far and away the number one issue that people ask me about in China, because they want to travel, but they also want to do something else. Tourism and business are often put together, and that is really important. And by the way, tourism is a leader for business, and that matters. I would also say that, one of the things that I kind of laugh about when people come to the U.S. is nobody realizes how big it is. So the idea is, we're almost half a continent away from Niagara Falls, but somebody can fly to Minneapolis and then go to Niagara Falls with a couple different flights, and that seems kind of like one flight or sort of one trip to people in other places. We'll go to Europe and go to 5 countries, and people there will laugh. The reality is, your falls, Orlando's Disney World, are all part of all of our infrastructure. Mayor Brady from Rochester, when I was over in China, now that's an hour and a half south of Minneapolis. When I was in China at a MedTech conference, they just talked about Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Rochester being part of it, as well as Winnipeg, as well as St. Louis, okay? So we are global within the country, too.
Terrific. I see one mayor with extensive experience in international travel to bring jobs is the former president of this conference, Don Plusquellic from Akron, Ohio.
Nearby neighbor, almost.
Yes.
I appreciate, as many of you have said, Mayor Villaraigosa's commitment to talk about this, because I believe it's important. I've been doing this international travel for 20-some years, even though we can show the results for more of the direct reverse investment that we concentrate on. We've co-sponsored with the Chamber export meetings with our small businesses. So we've been doing this for many years, and yet it still came up in this past year's election that I shouldn't be traveling and do that. So there is a downside. The one thing, though, a couple of points, there needs to be a long-term commitment by any community. And a mayor going over, the first time he comes back, or she, you're going to have a microphone stuck in your face and say, did you bring any business back? As if you bring them in your little satchel. So people need to understand the commitment needs to be long-term. But one of the things I liked, you talked about the comprehensiveness of this. It is tourism. It is foreign direct or reverse investment into our communities. I think the last number I saw was $239 billion of investment last year. And I tell my people, why should we not compete with Minneapolis or Jacksonville? Why should all those jobs go somewhere else? But there's one thing that you didn't mention here, and let me just say one other thing. I have been an advocate. I've been mayor for 25 years, 39 years in this business as a councilman. I have always believed that we could not just become a service economy and move money around. We have to make something. The problem is the lines get blurry, and I don't care if software is considered service, or it doesn't really matter. We're selling something. We have to make it here. The one thing about Thomas Friedman's comments that I totally disagreed with was it's not enough to just have the idea here and the research and development. You have to commercialize it so that somebody's making something and selling. So the question that I'm finally getting to here is you didn't mention, any of you, manufacturing policy for this country. And it is something that has been talked about in this administration for probably the first time that I've heard that term, at least consistently, for 20 years or more. It's different than a trade policy. There are differences, and that distinction and understanding and developing trade policy, manufacturing policy, so we're supporting those companies with policies here that help not completely protect them, but allow them to compete fairly in the world marketplace is something I'd like one of you, maybe Bruce and Undersecretary, to address.
Sure.
I'll defer to you, and then I can.
Sure.
Yeah.
My boss, Secretary John Bryson, has made promoting of advanced manufacturing one of his top 3 priorities. The first 2 are, much to my liking, export promotion, and secondly, foreign direct investment. But on advanced manufacturing, it's very much linked to research and development. So what Mr. Friedman talks about, the idea being created here and being tied to our universities, is absolutely critical. But what you say is also critical. It's the next step is that we also build it here. Secretary Bryson's term now is build it here, sell it everywhere. And so what are some of the things that President Obama is doing in support of that? Well, he has vigorously and consistently supported an innovation tax credit. He's encouraging tax policies that will allow companies that are abroad to be able to retain their profits, bring them back here, and invest them in either in manufacturing or in research and development that leads to manufacturing. But all these things are linked, and you're absolutely right. Services are very important. They will continue to be important, but we cannot forget the importance of manufacturing to our economy.
Mayor, on your issue on travel, and it goes back to why I said it's important to make the case, the value added to economic impact, because voters don't understand it. And so for me, I work with the Jacksonville Regional Chamber of Commerce and the Civic Council, and have the business community pick up my travel, which is important. And because I can tell you, in a tough economy, the backdrop is, at least in my city, I had inherited a $58 million deficit, right? And so people don't want to see you traveling. They don't understand that stuff. And so I got my first experience as soon as I landed at the airport. Mayor, you went to Brazil. But I made the case for it. And the other thing I said, hey, the private sector pays for it. So that public-private partnership, knowing the value is, as Ms. Jordan said about traveling, making the case, they want to see the mayor, you got to show up, has to be a priority. It's all about business. And I think that's why the public-private partnership is key. And I want to commend the President, Villaraigosa, for making this a top priority for the conference. This is so important for the growth of our city to be able to compete in a global economy, so it can become a normal thing and a conversation no matter what city you're in.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Very briefly, because we're running out of time.
Let me just, I'm sorry, I just got word that you're actually going to have a task force in a few minutes, so
Yes.
you can discuss this even further, and because we're running a little late, I'm going to call it, if that's okay with all of you. And I want to thank them, our moderator, Mary Jordan, and our esteemed panel here. Thank you all so much, and we couldn't be, I think you all got to figure it out. When you look at where all the new markets are, they're outside of the United States of America, and we've got to focus on those new markets, and this is a great way to do it. Thank you so much. With us is somebody that needs no introduction, either in the city of Boston or the Conference of Mayors. We are lucky to have a long line of past presidents who continue to serve as mayor of their cities, and one of them is Tom Menino. And Tom is here to update you all on the new food policy task force that he'll be chairing for the Conference of Mayors. There are a number of cities around the country that have been focused on this issue of food policy. I actually have a food policy director in my office, Paula Daniels. I know that in San Francisco and Boston and Chicago and a number of your cities, they're focused on this issue. Mayor Menino has graciously agreed to chair this policy task force, and we'll hear from him now.
Thank you very much, Mayor Valagrosa. Let me just say, I just killed his name, but that's okay. Menino Valagrosa, hey, you know. Let me just say very, very seriously, thanks for the introduction, and also to mayors who might be here for the first time at this meeting. I welcome you all to this organization. Get involved. This organization can and will make a difference in the national policy if we all work together on the issues that affect our cities, from education to housing to other issues that might pertain to what we need in our communities today. But the issue of food policy is an issue that's come up over the last couple of years, and the city of Boston has been out in the front of this issue with the mayor of Los Angeles. So I'm very pleased to chair the new task force on food policy, along with Vice Chair Mayor Rawlings Blake of Baltimore, who is another leader in the food policy issue, even though she's on the wrong side of the Sunday's football game, let me tell you. Oh, yeah. Seriously, though, we want to work with the mayors around the country to advocate for a food bill that supports consumers in America's cities. We want to support the revolution in urban agriculture and school food and the growing number of food entrepreneurs in our communities. We'll share our best practices. We'll come back to you in June with the new ideas for USCM food policy. Let me tell you a little about what we've done in the city of Boston. Since I've been mayor, we've opened 26 new supermarkets in the city of Boston. I'm especially proud of the Stop and Shops in our neighborhoods of Grove Hall and Jackson Square, because people said that full-service supermarkets wouldn't succeed in the inner city. Well, look at them now, and you'll see they are thriving and contributing to the revitalization of those neighborhoods. They came, and they succeeded. Now everyone else wants to be in the inner city. Not only must fresh food be accessible to people of all neighborhoods, it must also be accessible to people of all incomes. That's where Boston Bounty Bucks comes in. This program doubles the dollars available to food stamp recipients. You may have a similar program in your city. We also just opened winter farmers markets in the city of Boston. We also need to advocate for healthier eating in our city. Too many school kids are overweight or obese. We are taking action to reverse this trend. Since we took the soda and junk food out of vending machines in the Boston public schools, the data shows kids actually drink a lot less soda now than they did when we sold it in the schools. And that was one of my biggest political fights, taking soda out of the schools in Boston. I had parents and teachers against me, but, you know, mayors win. And we did take the soda machines out eventually. And last year, Boston Public Schools served 35,000 pounds of locally produced foods to our students. But I know we don't have all the answers, and we don't have all the answers. So I look forward to work with all of you on the development of a comprehensive urban food policy for USCM, one that encourages parents and teachers to help kids make the right choices, one that advocates for financing innovative new food startups, from greenhouses to neighborhood food trucks. We need large institutions in our cities, the hospitals, the universities, to make local food sources a priority. We in government need to become more small business friendly in terms of permitting and zoning. So I thank the President for appointing me to this committee. I really appreciate being involved in this, and so I ask you all, if you want to learn more about this with my co-chair and myself, we have a meeting today at 4:30 this afternoon that we'll roll out other ideas and how we're going to proceed over the next several months, so that in June when we go to Orlando, we will have a new food policy for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Hey, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I will. Okay, Menino. Say it. Via Raigosa. You got it. There you go. Screw up my name. No, I love him. We're very lucky to have him. Give him a big hand. Mayor Menino, great city of Boston. And I see that our next panel is already formed here with us. Our next session will be focused on preventing gang and youth violence. We began this discussion during our LA leadership meeting where we focused on gang violence prevention programs like our Summer Night Lights initiative. In fact, some 50 mayors visited one of our parks, if you recall. And now there are cities across the country that are working on the same gang violence reduction strategies. This last fall, our Vice President, Mayor Michael Nutter of Philadelphia, convened an important discussion regarding violence targeting African American males. And just 2 weeks ago, when he was inaugurated for his second term, Mayor Nutter pledged to work with mayors around the country to deal with the proliferation of illegal guns. I don't have to tell you that Mayor Michael Bloomberg and Mayor Menino have been focused on this issue, as have so many of the rest of us. Now, Mayor Nutter and I have been working closely together on these priorities, and I'm very pleased to have this discussion today. Moderating our panel will be Patrick McCarthy, who last spring became the president and CEO of the Annie E. Casey Foundation, an organization which the Conference of Mayors has a very strong partnership with. When he was the foundation's senior vice president, Patrick oversaw its work in a number of areas, including juvenile justice, youth development, and the mental health initiative for urban children. On our panel, along with Mayor Nutter, is New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu. Both Mayor Nutter and Mayor Landrieu have made reducing violence a top priority for their administrations. And also on our panel is Kathy Lanier, the highly respected chief of police for the District of Columbia. And you heard those numbers yesterday. I think the recollection is the homicide rate is down to 1963 levels. Amazing. This is the police chief, everybody. And the cornerstone of Chief Lanier's leadership has been her commitment to reducing violent crimes by fostering strong partnerships with both the community and the criminal justice system, resulting in a significant decrease in the number of homicides, which, as I said a few minutes ago. And of course, many of you remember him from our last meeting in Los Angeles. We're joined by Guillermo Céspedes, my deputy mayor and director of gang reduction and youth development. Guillermo has over 25 years of experience in the design, implementation, and supervision of the delivery of services to disadvantaged and at-risk youth. He is, without question, the architect of the Summer Night Lights program. Let me now turn over the panel to Patrick McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We're looking forward to a very lively discussion here. You know, the Casey Foundation does research and data analysis across all sorts of issues that affect kids. After 25 years of research, there are three things that just stand out as if a child experiences them, they're more likely to grow up with lousy outcomes, including becoming involved with gangs and with youth violence. Number one is poverty, a child that doesn't have a sense of hope and opportunity. Number two, a child who's not connected in a strong way to a family that has the resources to take care of them. And number 3, a child who's growing up in a community where there's a concentration of disadvantage, where it's not safe, where the schools are bad, et cetera. So the foundation has done a lot of work over the years in each of these 3 areas. We've done a lot of work to try to help build a path towards opportunity for parents and to put kids on a path towards success through educational investments. We do a lot of work around improving the strength of families to support kids. Obviously, lots of kids grow up poor and they do just fine. Usually that's because they're connected to a family that is strong. And finally, and I think most relevant for our conversation today, we do a lot of work in the area of community development, because we know that if a community is a good place to raise kids, it's a place where it's safe, where there are good schools, there's quality housing, parks, recreation, and that community is connected to employment and opportunity. So today's panel deals with some of the most challenging areas that any city faces. How do we protect families? How do we protect our youth from violence and from the kind of social disruption that goes along with gangs and youth violence? Thanks to all the panel members for being here today. We're going to start with just asking each panel member to make a few brief comments, and then there are going to be some specific questions that we'll dive into. And we'll go from my left over, and starting with Mayor Nutter.
Thank you, Patrick, and good afternoon, everyone. Just by way of context, Philadelphia, 5th largest city in America, 1.5 million people, about 6,400 police officers, which is actually fewer officers than when I was sworn in the first time 4 years ago. We have had some reduction in crime, but we've had some challenges, and I'll talk about those in a second. Part of the reason why, and I thank our President, Villaraigosa, for agreeing to have this panel, is to have more of a frank conversation about what's going on in many of our cities, and certainly urban America. A little context. In 2010, there were a little more than 13,000 murder victims in the United States of America. African Americans account for 50% of the total homicide victims, and 85% of those victims were African American men. On average each day, 16 young people between the ages of 10 and 24 are murdered. 86% of them are males. Of the offenders caught committing these murders, 16% are black men under the age of 24. Earlier this week, of course, we celebrated Martin Luther King's birthday, his life and legacy. 85,000 Philadelphians came out on a day of service. It was the largest Martin Luther King Day service celebration in the country. And of course, his legacy was one of service, personal responsibility, and hope. We're watching, unfortunately, an entire generation of African American men continue to fall behind. This next generation of children grow up, in many instances, without fathers, without uncles, without any positive male role model in their lives. And we're watching many communities, unfortunately, crumble under the weight of incarceration, drugs, illiteracy, and most of all, violence. The question is, while we're watching, what are we doing? I want to call on all of our mayors to stand as an organization, as a group, to confront this violence and not put up with it any longer. And this is a call to action, and we need a national discussion to start moving toward having a direct impact on this violence as it affects our communities and our families. A couple of actions in Philadelphia. Last year, I reestablished what had been created 20 years ago by my predecessor, Mayor Good, the Mayor's Commission on African American Males, to comprehensively address the issues facing African American men, and not only with regard to crime and public safety issues, but also job training, health care services, education, and employment opportunities. The Commission has two major goals: addressing comprehensively the issues surrounding this community, and to provide strategic programming and opportunities for African American men in Philadelphia. As Mayor Villaraigosa also mentioned, last October I hosted an event in Philadelphia called Cities United at the National Constitution Center. Our good friend Mayor Mitch was there, and a number of other mayors. During that conference, we understood that government, nonprofits, businesses, schools, community leaders, and stakeholders all need to work together if we are to help black men and boys excel and thrive in the 21st century. This crisis is not just a law enforcement issue. This is a community-based issue. And we must include education as a top priority as a component of our public safety strategy in our cities. And when we look at graduation rates, we also see differences between and among the various races and ethnic groups. The four-year cohort high school graduation rate in Philadelphia is 58%. White and Asian males exceed this rate, 62% for white, 76% for Asian males. And black and Latino males fall below the average, 51% for African American males, 42% for Hispanic or Latino males. And while looking at college graduation and education, only 1 in 10 Philadelphia high school freshmen will actually graduate from a four-year college. Of course, some of those key factors with regard to the dropout rate are failing math, failing English, less than an 80% attendance rate, and poor behavior. In Philadelphia in 2011, we had 316 homicides in our city. That's still down from when I first came into office. 82% were killed with a firearm. 85% of the victims were African American. 94% of the African Americans killed by firearms were males. Year to date, we have 21 murders in Philadelphia. We're off to a terrible start this year, including last week. 30-year-old man shot up a vehicle with 7 teenagers in that vehicle, killing 3, and 1 was shot in the neck. This was after a series of disputes among teenagers over Facebook that have been going on since last summer, culminated with these 7 young people being out at 10:30 at night, showing up at the home of one of the individuals that they were arguing with, and this man who was a stepfather of the other kid caught them in the alley, in the vehicle, not armed, never gotten out, and shot up the car. We know the risk factors, we know the stats. And what we need to do, of course, is take action and take it head on. And so I look forward to an engaged conversation. We must be able to have these kinds of discussions without fear of retribution from particular constituencies or fear of felt criticism that we're only blaming the victims. This is about behavior. This is about bad decision making. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mayor Nutter. And Mayor Landrieu?
Thank you, Mayor Mike, for those courageous comments. You know, all over America, if you look at the numbers, some cities are better than others, but everybody's got the problem. New Orleans, in some instances, has it worse than others, but it's not happening really well anywhere. When you look at the numbers on the issue of murder, which is obviously a subset of the overarching issue of violence, I like to say a lot of times that if you're not safe, you can't be free. Everybody knows what happens to a community, to a family, to a neighborhood, to an economy when people begin to feel unsafe, and that is an overarching issue. But the specific one that both Mayor Nutter and I have begun to speak more clearly about and more forcefully about are the number of deaths that are taking place on the American streets that are occurring between young African American men for seemingly no reason at all. Now, I'll give you some statistics in New Orleans. With 343,000 people, we have between 1,200 and 1,300 police officers. We have a school system that we're reorganizing. We're working both on the front end and on the back end of this. So we've doubled the funding for the recreation department to try to stop the kids from getting to where they don't need to be. We're working on innovative measures in our schools. We're doing everything that we think everybody else in the country is doing. We're borrowing from the Milwaukee Homicide Review Commission that we call the Mayor's Strategic Command. We're working on some initiatives that St. Louis put in place. I had a great conversation with the chief here about some of the wonderful work that she's doing. But let me sear these statistics into your mind. We had 199 murders in New Orleans last year. That's 14% above the year before. From 1990 through today, we have always had 7 to 10% higher than the national average. But if you look around the country, what you're going to find is in about 73 cities, you've got a higher murder rate than other places. And in those cities, it's in 4, 5, 6, 7 neighborhoods that follow very closely along the lines that he was talking about, where you find poverty, family breakdown, and not great pathways to prosperity, either in early childhood education, primary and secondary schools, or VOTEC schools. In New Orleans, the victim information, 86.5% of the victims are male, 91.5% of the victims are African American. Over half of the victims are under the age of 28. Criminal history, 65% have a prior felony, 33% have a prior arrest for illegal firearm possession. 55% are unemployed. That's victim. Let's talk about the perpetrators for a minute. 95% of the perpetrators are male. 97% of the perpetrators are African American. Over the half of the perpetrators are under 23. Criminal history, 83% of the perpetrators have a prior felony. 40% have had a prior arrest for illegal firearm possession. Over 55% are unemployed. 88% of them knew each other. Now, that is a startling number or level of statistics. It's unconscionable. It's unacceptable. It doesn't have to be that way. It can change. But we are seeing an alarming spike of the boldness of these activities. In New Orleans, a couple of weeks ago, two guys got in a fight around where they live. They shot each other or shot at each other, and the bullet happened to find the head of a 2-year-old child who was killed. Not long before that, there was a young boy named Jeremy Gallman who was not much older than that was in the arms of his grandmother, and he got caught in the middle of gunfire. And when we talk about the consequence of that kind of behavior on cities and on communities and on families, the devastation is almost hard to comprehend. So I want to congratulate and thank Mayor Nutter for taking this issue on and for the Conference of Mayors for addressing it. I think we have to speak directly to it. I don't think that we can be afraid of it. There are examples, and I think the Chief is going to tell us some that she is using where we're seeing great successes around the country. We have to find them. We have to mirror them. And then the federal, state, and local governments, along with the private sector, not-for-profits, have to work together to focus very, very quickly on this issue, and I look forward to further comments during the panel discussion.
Thank you. I'm going to give you just a little perspective on Washington also. I've been with MPD, the Metropolitan Police Department, for 21 years. My first year on the job, we had 479 murders in the city. Our population was about 10% less then than it is now. Our homicide closure rate at the time was in the low 40%. Most of my career, Washington, D.C. has been known as two things: the homicide capital of the world and the city of unsolved murders. There are literally thousands of unsolved cold cases and murders in the city. What I'm going to talk about is, I don't have a magic bullet, and in the 3 to 5 minute opening, I can only give you one aspect of what we've done here, but it's the one aspect that should make everybody think about whatever it is that you are doing, because we tend to look at successful models and then emulate those models. And New York City being one of the most famous, looking at how New York was so successful in reducing violent crime, two of the most popular policing methods around the country were hotspots policing, create a density map of where most of your murders are, and for all of us it's the same, just a handful of neighborhoods. And then flood those neighborhoods with police and do zero tolerance. Even the smallest of violations that is chargeable results in arrest. Well, this is supported by Kelling and Wilson, who did the broken windows theory many, many years ago, so it makes sense. But I can tell you that successful policing models don't come in a one-size-fits-all. And what is very successful in one place can have completely the opposite impact somewhere else. And I'm going to give you that example in my opening comments. So hotspots and zero-tolerance policing in Washington, D.C. had the opposite effect for us. East of the river, there's two police districts, 6th and 7th District, historically, as long as I've been on, has accounted for at least 60% of all the murders in the city, two small patrol districts. Some of those neighborhoods were notorious. So we had always done the same thing, and for the past 15 years, we flood the neighborhood with a lot of cops, zero tolerance. If you're out drinking a beer on your front stoop, you've got an open container of alcohol, you're going to jail. The problem for us is that does two things. One is, what you forget is most of your victims also come from that same neighborhood. Secondly, the people that have the information about who's doing the shooting, they also live in that neighborhood. So when you're doing the zero tolerance policing, who are you picking up and who are you alienating? Your residents, your victims, and your witnesses. So now they have no respect for the police. They have no reason to speak to the police. The other problem that I had, that I think every police department has or has had at some time, so nobody likes the police because we go into these high crime neighborhoods and we lock them down and we lock everybody up. So they don't like us, they don't trust us, they don't want to talk to us. But even inside the organization, the people that have information that would help us prevent and solve crimes won't talk to each other, because inside a police organization, knowledge is power. And narcotics detectives that have sources that can help close homicides is not going to call a homicide detective and share his source. Everybody knows that. Patrol officers who really know the most about everybody in the neighborhood and where their girlfriend lives and where their grandmother lives and what car they drive have a wealth of information, but there's no homicide detective that's going to go talk to a uniformed patrol officer and get that information, because clearly the homicide detective is superior. So that was my second problem. The third problem was I have great technology and great analytical staff, but I couldn't get the people in all the various different units that had the bits and pieces of information to share it with the guy that could analyze it and use the technology to give us the ability to predict violence and stop it. So that was the second challenge. The third big challenge really is a culture of policing nationwide. And I hear police leaders say it, I hear managers say it, and I hear officers say it. We can't stop homicides. That's crap. We can and we do. And until you change that culture, you're not going to implement any kind of effective policing to reduce homicides. So now the solution. I don't know if we have my slides. That first slide that's up there, that is kind of the analysis of the problem. And as you can see, guns, gangs, and drugs is at the heart of all of our problems. If you're not a gang member or a drug user or toting a gun, you're probably not going to get murdered in most cities. So the solution is the outside ring, which is, as you see, the orange and the yellow, gathering intelligence and information and community partnerships and connections. We couldn't get either one of those. I've already explained that because we've alienated those folks. We couldn't do anything on the outside to solve the problems on the inside. So our solution really was to do the opposite. So I did, in fact, use hotspots. I looked at the areas in my neighborhoods where the most violence was concentrated, east of the river. I did, in fact, dump a ton of resources, in fact, all my resources into those two neighborhoods. But I had to change the mentality. First of all, if I tell my cops to go out and do community policing, you know, there's all kinds of reasons why that's just not a good strategy. First of all, it's not cop-like. Secondly, nobody really knows what community policing is by definition. So I told them I needed to go out and develop sources. And I started with patrol cops because typically developing sources is for narcotics. And how do they develop sources? They lock people up or threaten to lock them up and get them to cooperate. But I wanted a different mentality. I took foot patrol officers, 300 of them, put them out in the highest crime neighborhoods and told them, I need you to develop sources. And how do you go about developing sources? You get to know everybody in the neighborhood. You treat them with respect. Everybody you come across as sir or ma'am. And, you know, do the exact opposite of zero tolerance. I gave those officers handheld devices, BlackBerries. They have access to their email. They have a cell phone number. I pay for your phone. You're going to give the number out. They give their cell phone number to the old lady sitting on her porch drinking her beer at 9 o'clock in the morning instead of making her dump her beer. And get to know people in neighborhoods. That was the first step. I can tell you, a big anonymous police force is never going to get information. People have to know somebody by name that they can call, that they trust to give information. And that was the first step. The second step is that some people aren't going to trust us anyway. You have to have means of getting information that everybody in the criminal justice system is opposed to. So I wanted to start an anonymous text tip line. Everybody in homicide said, oh, no, Chief, don't do that. You're going to ruin it. We can't use anonymous sources, and then we'll have to just run down all these crazy leads. And the United States Attorney's Office says, you know, we've been working on this stop snitching campaign for all these years. You're just going to undo that. So everybody, the sky was falling. Don't do it. All right, well, we did it anyway. We created an anonymous text tip line primarily because the people with the information to prevent some of the violence are the young people, and young people don't talk on telephones. They're not going to walk up to a cop and tell them something. But if you give them a text number, ours is 50411, while you're here in my city, if you need that. 50411, our tagline was give the 50 the 411. We started out in the schools, and the information started to come in at an unbelievable rate. And I'm telling you, the detailed information that we get on those text tips that have helped us interdict guns, to take shooters off the street, to anticipate gang violence has been unbelievable. We've expanded it, and I'll show you some stats. Actually, if you can go to the next slide. You know, I can't show you statistically what we prevent, and that's frustrating for a police officer, but I can show you in these numbers what we prevented and how we prevented them. sure we're looking at the right slide here. So if you look at the top graph, actually, my eyes aren't that good, sorry. I've got a little tiny screen up here. All right, so if you look at the top graph, this is our text tip line. I implemented it in 2008. We got 292 text tips in. By the end of 2011, we were over 1,200. That's a 300% increase. And I can tell you the type of tips we get in is just simply unbelievable. As soon as a shooting happens or if there's a beef that wells up in the schools, if my school resource officers don't already have it, we're getting names, addresses, descriptions on cars, everything before the violence even starts. So that's an important part of it. The other thing, graph I can show that helps support that we've actually established those good relationships and people do trust us now. On the bottom graph, that's our reward payouts. We have always had $25,000 reward for arrest that leads to, or information that leads to arrest and conviction. So that's not an anonymous tip. That's somebody who's willing to come forward and be prepared to testify. And we could never get that in Washington, D.C. Nobody, and you'd have a broad daylight shooting with 30 witnesses, nobody was going to be given information to police, much less testifying. We give out, if you look at our increase in text, in our reward money, in 2006 and 2007, we were around $200,000 a year. Starting in 2008, we jumped up to $400,000 a year and have remained above $400,000 a year since. As a result of that, if we can go to the next slide. First of all, in the last 3 years, our murders have been reduced by 42%. Last year alone, east of the river, we reduced murders 56% in 1 year. And that is in the area of the city that has traditionally had 60+% of all of our murders, because that's where we built those relationships and focused our efforts. And if you look at the next slide, our homicide closure rate this year is 95%. National average for cities our size is 56%. And national average for departments of any size is in the low 60%. So if those numbers don't support that, we've established connections in our community, people do trust us, and some of those things that are successful other places are not so successful here. Nothing else paints a better picture than those numbers. So with that, I'll leave you with just the thought when you talk about youth violence and youth homicides and some of the other issues. There's many, many social issues, and I agree with everything that has been said. We had a huge problem with juvenile offenders and juvenile victims. Last year, we reduced the number of persons under the age of 18 arrested for murder only by 5%, but we reduced the number of victims by 55%, because there's a lot more that goes along with policing than arresting people. My philosophy has been, you need to have less crime, but you should do it with less arrest. And if you have less crime and less arrest, that's the goal, and not measuring everything by statistics on how many lockups you make. So maybe there's some element of that you can use in your jurisdiction. Maybe there's some new philosophy that fits better for your city. But my opinion has been that is one of the most successful things for us in D.C.
So I think Mayor Lander has a quick question, and then we're going to go to the final.
Yeah, Chief, thank you for that. That was spectacular. I just wanted to ask you, though, from the time that you started to implement these new policies to the time that you started seeing meaningful results, how long did it take to put it in place, to ramp it up, and then to see some meaningful and dramatic change?
Some things work faster than others. The tip line was instant. Once we got the tip line out, that was instant. We marketed it pretty heavily with our young people first, and so that went pretty well. Changing the culture inside the organization has taken me, it took a good 2 years. And I tell you, it has to be zero tolerance for information sharing, to the point where right now, we finally got this down. Right now, if there's a shot spotter hit or a gunshot that's fired, I've got a gang conflict going on right now in the city, and everybody in the department knows it because we share that. But if there's a gang conflict going on right now and I get a gunshot in neighborhood 1, and we know neighborhood 2 and 1 are in conflict, within 5 minutes, and I just showed you an example of this, within 5 minutes of that gunshot being fired, our gang intelligence unit will deploy to both of the neighborhoods where the gangs that are in conflict are and start knocking on doors of the rival gang members and letting them know, hey, we're just checking in. This takes away the anonymity, which is the retaliation, and that buys us enough time to go after the offender. So forcing that information sharing took a good 2 years, and I had to replace about 5 homicide commanders.
So I'm going to suggest we move on to Deputy Mayor Pettis, and then we'll...
Thank you. In July of 2007, our mayor took a very bold step and created the Mayor's Office of Gang Reduction and Youth Development. Most of his advisors thought he was committing, this wasn't a very wise political thing to do. In a city with over 400 gangs and 41,000 documented gang members, that does not include the county, that is just the city of LA, and where 54% of all homicides are gang-related homicides. He not only created this office, but he also brought in all of the funding of all of the gang prevention and gang intervention programs that were scattered throughout the city and created, in essence, an infrastructure that is now staffed by 30 full staff members. It's led by a deputy mayor with direct access and accountability to the mayor, a $24 million budget, and very rigorous evaluation measures, because 83% of our funding comes from the general fund. The problem has been defined repeatedly in this panel. This year we celebrated the second year in Los Angeles with homicides under 300. 298 homicides is too many. There are things that we're doing that we're very proud of, that we think are being very effective, and I agree with Mayor Nutter that there's a lot of work that we still have to do. So I'm going to share with you what my mandate is on behalf of the city, which is the comprehensive strategy that we implement to try to address this problem. We could go to the first slide, please. There are three components of this comprehensive strategy that we find extremely valuable. Number one, that is place-based. We have identified 13 what we call gang reduction youth development zones throughout the city, and I'll give you a quick profile of what those zones look like. They're relatively small, 3.5 square miles on an average. 40% of the population are youth under 18. 55% of foster care youth attend schools in those zones, and 31% of youth on probation attend schools in those zones. Roughly 30% of the families live below the poverty line as compared to 19% for the rest of LA, with a median income of $30,000. These are marginalized communities, forgotten communities, communities that we, in the helping profession, would rather ignore. Second component of the comprehensive strategy is that it's family-based. And by family-based, I don't mean that we focused on families to blame them for what has taken place, but we do need to recruit families to become our partners in resolving this issue. The issue of gang violence and the issue of youth who are insistent in developing a full-fledged identity as a gang member. Family, in the context of our comprehensive strategy, is minimally 3 generations. So we're not talking about mom, dad, sort of the usual nuclear unit. That means we engage across the city in all of our strategy, minimally 3 generations of families, and recruit them to help us with this. And then the last element of the comprehensive strategy is that it is empirically driven. The history, I think you've heard all the terms. LA is the gang capital of the world, the mothership, the belly of the beast, the city that exported gangs, all of that. Most of the solutions that were applied prior to the mayor setting up the Office of Gang Reduction and Youth Development were really driven by conventional wisdom. And not necessarily empirical evidence, not necessarily research, but conventional wisdom. What we mean by empirical evidence or empirically driven comprehensive strategy is that not only do we need to rely on the best research, but gang dynamics change every single day. So we spend a lot of time on the ground figuring out how that fixed data about gang numbers and who is aligned with who changes on a day-to-day basis. What does a comprehensive strategy look like? If we could go to the next slide. All right, so it is made up of 5 prongs and 18 different strategies. And we won't go through each one of the strategies, but I urge you to at least divide this chart into 3 components: the prevention component, the intervention component, and what we call the law enforcement component. Prevention, we separate into the aspects that have to do with building community resiliency, because these youth live in communities that are devastated by social conditions. Secondary prevention for us means addressing those youth who are at the highest risk of becoming gang involved. Now, we don't eyeball that anymore. We've had researchers develop a tool, and each one of the 10 to 15-year-olds that receive services through our comprehensive strategy have been identified to be at the highest risk of becoming gang involved. Most of the research shows that less than 15% of youth in the worst of neighborhoods in LA become fully identified as a gang member. So we have to identify who that 15% is. Our chief of police, probably my closest partner in this endeavor, Charlie Beck, maintains that 2 to 3% of that 15% are the actual shooters. Intervention. So prevention means preventing these kids from becoming gang affiliated, gang identified. Intervention for us refers to the idea of extracting and building an exit ramp for those who are already gang involved. In that aspect, we do use former gang members that have become certified, trained, fingerprinted, and hired through the city of LA to actually help us in tandem with law enforcement to engage those members of the community that are most likely to be victims of violence or perpetrators of violence. And of course, the law enforcement component, which we do use the term community policing. I do spend a lot of time with my partner, Charles Beck, at community meetings, dealing with communities after major takedowns, after officer-involved shootings, sometimes at basketball games, etc. There are 3 components of what we do that run across all the 5 prongs. What we call community and law enforcement engagement. Those of us who've been in the field for a long time have attempted to do this work separate of law enforcement. It's just not very effective. And I think LA has tried every strategy on the law enforcement end, from kicking down doors and, the hard knock approach and all of that, and that was not very effective. So for us, law enforcement is a part of the community. So we develop strategies that cut across all of the prongs that we refer to as community law enforcement engagement strategies. The Summer Night Lights program that you folks visited, it's gotten a lot of national attention. The value of the program is this. We know in LA that Wednesday through Saturday, 7 p.m. to midnight, from July 4th to Labor Day weekend, youth violence spikes. Starting in 2008, although we piloted the program in 2003 and 2004, we started basically developing programmatic strategies that kept every stakeholder in the community at recreational facilities at least until midnight. And when I say every stakeholder, I don't mean, the definition of stakeholder means it includes those who are gang involved or gang affiliated. It is the only time during the year in Los Angeles where gang injunctions are not enforced, as long as people are participating in the program. Again, it's place-based, particular neighborhoods during the time of the year where crime is likely to spike. And we've been doing that for 4 years. And then, of course, evaluation. We have to make sure that what we're doing is working, and if it's not working, we need to change courses. Fortunately, I have the full support of my boss, so that if a strategy is not working, he is not bashful about changing the direction of that strategy. Most of the time that I spend with the boss is actually in these neighborhoods. I would say probably 85% of my meeting time with him is walking through these neighborhoods in the middle of the night. I'm going to give you some rough numbers about our evaluation, what seems to be effective. And again, keep in mind that we have a lot of work to do, but we have started to collect data that tells us that we're perhaps on the right track. I'll start with the Summer Night Lights program. This past summer, we had 774,000 visits to these sites. We fed 484,000 meals. We provided 1,614 jobs, primarily to youth who would not be employed during the summer. We had a 35% reduction in gang-related Part 1 crime, a 43% reduction in aggravated assaults, and a 55% reduction in shots fired, which we're very excited about. If people shoot less, people get hit less. Those numbers are from July 4th, Labor Day weekend, Wednesday through Saturday, 7 p.m. to midnight. At the intervention level, we do something different than many other cities, which is I have a staff of 30. With the exception of the fiscal team, we're all on call 24/7, 365 days a year. So whenever there is a gang-related incident anywhere in the city, it is not just law enforcement that responds. There's what we call a relational triangle that includes law enforcement responds, gang intervention workers respond, and a representative, either me or one of my staff members from the mayor's staff, responds. That is 24/7, 365 days a year. From April 2009 to December of 2011, we responded in this format to 2,058 incidents. Now, why do we do this? The issue of retaliation, we have not yet achieved the point where we can predict a homicide, but we've gotten fairly effective at reducing levels of retaliation. So, and that reduction, that strategy to reduce retaliation starts the minute there's an incident.
So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, what I'm going to suggest, given the limited time we have, I was going to give the panel members an opportunity to ask a question of each other, and meanwhile ask the folks in the room here to think about a question or an issue you want to raise. We got started a little bit late, so we're very tight on time. But anyone from the panel want to raise a question with any of the other panel members?
No, why don't we just...
You want to go right to the... Okay, that's fine by me. So again, as in the last session, if you have a question, please raise your hand. There are microphones that will come to you. When you raise your question, would you please just let us know who you are? So I see a hand here in the middle of the room. Do we have a microphone?
I want to make sure we also get our Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake is the chair of our Criminal and Social Justice Committee, and I know she's doing some exciting things in Baltimore as well. I want to make sure that we hear from her.
Yes, as a Baltimorean, I would be quite remiss in not giving the representative of the city in which the winning team on Saturday comes from. So we'll have this question first, and then we'll turn it over to Mayor Rawlings Blake.
Thank you. To all the panelists, my name is Linda Thompson. I'm the mayor of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I want to commend you on your efforts to combat crime and bring it down. Mayor Nutter's no stranger to what we're doing in Harrisburg, but to the chief of police, I commend you. It's amazing some of the things you talked about without even knowing what you were doing. I started in 2010. We had homicides at 17 homicides in my first year. And we're now down to 6. We had our first homicide of this year, and that's because of smart policing. I took the cops out of the cars and put them on the street, and it just went back to how I was raised when I noticed Mr. Friendly walking in neighborhoods, building relationships and giving a sense of trust with the citizens, and they are telling and talking to our police. We had 100% resolution in our homicides for 2011. Every single homicide that occurred in 2010, we resolved in 2011, and that's because the cops got out there, started going to the bars, building relationships with the citizens, and using those people to have a trust level with them, a level of confidence. and we resolve those homicides. Also, what I've done with getting the guns off the street, since we're not getting any help from our United States Congress, I'm putting signs all up throughout my city saying the mayor's illegal gun, anonymous tippers. So anyone who knows about a nephew, a neighbor, an uncle, or aunt who's carrying an illegal gun, I ask them to call us in, tip us off, and then we'll do the investigation to determine whether they are a legal gun bearer. So if mayors want to, these signs are allowing people to call in anonymously and tell us where they know these guns are to help get them off the street. So I just want to commend you in your efforts of smart policing and say that it is working. It depends on your neighborhood, but we're really forceful about it. And I had pushback, too, from the old guard. I'm a first-time woman mayor in the city of Harrisburg, first African-American woman, and police officers are 95% white, and they just had this culture inside, and I just kept pushing and using my authority and got some changing, and now they're on board, and we're really working well. We're also involved with the intervention as well. We just opened up a new PAL Center. After 40 years of not having it open, our police officers now are actively engaged with teaching our kids, just how to be involved with school. They're being mentors. We started a program where we took them out shopping for Christmas. We raised money and gave the kids $100 to go out and shop, to buy gifts for their parents, because these are very impoverished kids who often lead to crime. So these are some of the innovative things we're doing to not only get involved with the intervention, but also the prevention as well. And our district attorney is very much involved with us. He's on the PAL board, and so we have a very global effort with community people being involved with trying to get this crime under control. So thank you again for your leadership.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Mayor Rawlings-Blake.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to working as vice chair. And Patrick, thank you very much for mentioning your hometown now, Baltimore. It is. I'm certainly honored to have the Annie E. Casey Foundation in Baltimore, and thanks for rooting. Even though I'm scooting out very shortly because I have to cement the bet with Mayor Menino, who in his heart must be a Ravens fan since he came up to the microphone sporting a Ravens purple tie, but that's another story. Everyone saw it. I'm not making it up. Youth violence has been a problem in Baltimore for many years, and we've taken a collaborative approach, building on relationships and partnerships, and we've driven juvenile violence down in the last 2 years alone by 37%. Since 2007, juvenile homicides are down nearly 50%, shootings down nearly 70%, and it is because we, just like Mayor Nutter advised me when I first became a mayor, if you see something that works in another city, steal it. So we have our Safe Streets initiative, which is modeled off of Ceasefire. It's been very successful, that model that I'm sure people are familiar with, and it is, we just announced with help of federal funding an expansion into more neighborhoods. We have the diversion program that has the benefit of federal funding that pulls at-risk kids that have the first-time contact with the juvenile justice system for nonviolent offenses. We're adding funding to that. Those are federal funds. And all of these things are hanging in the balance. So as we work to collaborate on strategies, we also need to work to collaborate on lobbying to make sure that these funds, the juvenile justice funds, the Burns money, the COPS money, aren't cut. As Mayor Smith says, that we make smart cuts. So we can make sure that we continue to have a safe city. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you. Sorry I have to scoot out to make my bet, and hopefully you all are rooting for the Ravens. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I see a hand towards the back here, center. This microphone over here.
I can't get over it.
This is Joe Riley from Charleston, South Carolina. Quickly, it's a great panel, and thank you all for so many wonderful ideas. In following up with some ideas from the Chief of Police in Washington, something that we do that I think is easily replicable is we have our summer camp in the inner city for our kids' middle school students that their middle school principals recommend would benefit from some additional mentoring and support in the summer, and the police department runs it. It's on a very modest budget. We call it Camp Hope. They from 5:30 in the afternoon till 9 o'clock. Lots of different activities and interesting and fun things for the kids. When they get their diploma at the end of the summer, they give the police officer a big hug. But the families and the community members are aware of what's going on. So we get far more cooperation from the neighborhoods now when crimes occur. And the relationship with our police department, which was good, is even better. And it's a modest program, easy to do, doesn't cost much money, and the payoff is huge.
Let me just, on your point real quick, we do run summer camps here in the police department through Camp Brown. The positive programming for prevention, especially in the summertime, is critical. We take about 7,000 kids into police department programs every year, but we couldn't do it. I know my boss is not here today, but he was here the other day. But without the mayor's commitment to having all the other agencies support us, which Mayor Gray has been wonderful at, Department of Parks and Recreation and all the social service agencies, he has them support us, so I don't have, I mean, my cops work the summer camps and the summer programs, but a lot of that stuff he has the other agencies pitch in and help, which is a tremendous support mechanism for the families also.
Mayor Landrieu?
Yeah, if I might, and I thank the mayor from Baltimore for talking about seizing other cities' initiatives, which we have aggressively done, and I took to heart what Chief Lanier said about not one size fits all, and we have really tried to borrow from best practices. I know that Boston and now Baltimore, but Chicago also was working on what they call ceasefire. We've now expanded that into 3 cities. We're just beginning to do that, and we're hoping to see, based on what other folks tell us, some meaningful results. But Patrick, I didn't want to be remiss in not mentioning Andy Casey Foundation. Before I became mayor, I had the pleasure of being the lieutenant governor of the state, and we worked with Andy Casey on juvenile justice reform. Just an unbelievable partner in trying to get that system right. So I think the chief made a really good point. You want to aggressive policing, but you want to arrest the right people and not the wrong people, and you want to have the capacity in your jails for the right people, not the wrong people. And in Louisiana, our juvenile justice system was upside down, and so what we were doing was actually putting the wrong kids in jail and then training them how to be better criminals and not having the kind of services that we needed. And we continue to work on that in Louisiana. Unfortunately, New Orleans at the time did not really opt into the city, into that reform. And so we're continuing to implement what we did on the statewide level. But you guys have really been fantastic in that, and I thank you for your support. And as Stephanie said, it does require public resources, not-for-profit, federal, state, and local. And then again, cross-agency cooperation, because it's not just a policing issue. Right. And I know a lot of the police officers say it just can't be us, and they're correct. They got to do their job, but it's got to be everybody as well.
I think I saw Mayor Kwan. Can we get a microphone over here?
I just wanted to thank Los Angeles, and I had sent a crew down after. I don't know how many of you went this summer and went to Antonio's old neighborhood in Boyle Heights, and I was a little skeptical. I said, well, is this like a show? Because there were so many people in the park, right? And I actually sort of lived out that way for a short time. And we went back and replicated in Oakland in a tough neighborhood in a park that had been taken over by a gang. And I didn't have the kind of money or the infrastructure. I wanted to try it right away. And so we picked 6 Fridays, and we basically got hot dogs donated and we just started having turf dance contests and DJs, and pretty soon, by the end of summer, we had 200 parents hanging out there, and that was the beauty of this. Parents out there, in this case, Black and Latino parents who had not been talking to each other in a park that no one was using because they're afraid of being there. And by the end of summer, the crime in that neighborhood, I'm just thinking 6 Fridays, nothing fancy, none of the staffing that he has. He hires teenagers to organize it, which would have been better, and I'm looking to do that next year. He had health groups come in and do nutrition displays, and they had all of these activities, and it made the parks feel safe. And it didn't cost a lot of money. And we're not, obviously, being here, we're all gotten the message from the Hill. We're not getting a lot of money, but I actually urge people to try it. I didn't have a lot of money. We only did it 6 Fridays. The crime in that neighborhood went down 50% by the end of summer. Because the parents got to know each other, right, and the kids began to feel safe, and we basically chased the gangs out of the park, and didn't cost a lot of money. So I think these things, I stole from LA as quickly as I could, and the one question I do have is that you do have an amazing program. You hire the kids, you get the food donated, and you got a lot of it from the private sector. Could you tell us just a little bit more how you got the donations to get your program going?
Well, part of that is also related to an infrastructure that's been created in our city. We actually have a deputy mayor of strategic partnerships whose entire function of that office is to create private-public partnerships. Our Summer Night Lights program, the one that your staff came to visit and you came to visit with the mayors, we do not have a public line item budget for it, meaning that we raise roughly between $2.5 and $3.5 million per year to do that program. Now, when your staff came to visit, we in fact went to some parks that were very successful, but we also went to some parks that we were having real difficulties with. And what was impressive to me, we actually spent about 14 hours with your staff, is that they understood the very basic concept of what it takes to reduce violence through this approach. It really isn't about the hot dogs or some of the other fancy activities. It really is about community engagement. So I maintain that in these neighborhoods, communities will choose this type of program over body bags all the time. These are not communities that really would like to have violence in that community. So whatever resources we can bring in, the program can be done 1 day a week, 3 days a week, or full-blown how we do it. And for us, it was, we learned a lot by spending time with your staff.
I think that's a terrific quote on which to end, that a community will choose this kind of engagement over body bags anytime. Please join me in thanking the panel for the stimulating discussion.
All right, yeah, no, just call me.
Pleasure.
Chief, great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck with you.
Thank you.
Well, the anonymous tip line gets no money. Okay, it's no money. Now, I do have a gun tip line.
Okay, that's a separate thing. Okay,
I've expanded all my different tips. But I started with the strangers, the tips, targeting the kids, the young people. I marketed in the schools, I marketed in the cell blocks.
So my son's a teenager. And he told me, he said, well,
I'm
this is a good song.
Right.
He said, I don't, and I said, yeah, he said, I saw one roll a kid through a plate glass of stove, so I said,
She's like my other generation.
no, she's very smart. He said, well, that's he's my son.